Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. This is the last Southern Jewish Voices of this season, and we are, of course, ending on a high note with our very own board president, Issa Dorsky. We can't wait to get into this.
Can't wait.
Luckily, Southern Jewish Voices has been funded for another season thanks to the Birmingham Jewish Federation and Foundation. So we will be back in September with new interviews from September to May once a month. So be on the lookout, and if you have any suggestions of people that you want to see interviewed, you can email me with your suggestions. One thing before we get started, there is a flyer on your tables for a really important program we have coming up on June 8th. It's a screening of the documentary film October 8th. And it has been funded by Richard and Sally Friedman Fund at the foundation. We're really excited for it. You can register really easily there with the QR code on your phone. All right, let's get started. Margaret, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is this working? Okay, well, I want to echo Zoe by saying thank you all for being here, and many of you have attended quite a few sessions of Southern Jewish Voices this season, so thank you for coming and supporting. I'm really excited to be here with Issa. I know a lot of our interviewees are often nervous to be up here, but I also know this is a room of friendly faces, and I always think the energy on this program is really lovely. So we are going to jump into it. I will say we have probably our youngest ever attendee of Southern Jewish Voices here today in the front row. We're so happy to see that.
I'll check that though. Carly was the youngest. Youngest attendee. Carly was a younger participant.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Carly might be our youngest participant, but our youngest attendee, your beautiful nephew, who's here in the front row. So if you hear a little babbling, you can smile and enjoy that because it's lovely to have him here. So we're going to jump on in, and we're going to start with your early life. You are a fourth generation Birminghamian. Not sure now that I said that. Hamian, thank you. And I'd love if you could just give us a little background on your family history. Both sides of your family are from here. Share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, my dad's grandparents all moved here when they were very young, so we've been here forever. My mom's parents moved here as young adults, but we have a ton of family. Everybody jokes that I'm related to everyone, and there's a fair amount of people in this room today who I am related to, so thanks for coming, and thank you everybody for coming today. We've all been really connected in the Jewish community our whole lives, and it's really special. You know, we would go everywhere, and people know us, people know our families, and I don't think you have that everywhere.
Yeah, and I don't think everybody has that. I was really struck in our initial conversation by that deep sense of home, and we'll kind of keep hitting on that throughout our interview. So let's talk a little bit about your parents, your immediate family. Both of your parents, of course, grew up here. I think they're both here today. Tell us how your parents met to start.
My parents met in this very building on the master swim team as adults. They didn't know each other growing up. My dad's 7 years older. Both sets of grandparents knew each other and had similar friend groups. Beck and I grew up here. We kind of have a split religious life growing up. My mom grew up at Bethel. My dad grew up at Emmanuel. I grew up at Emmanuel. My sister grew up at KI and Bethel. It just depended on, what was going on at the time, how we were involved.
Yeah, and I'll pull out sort of two through lines there. One, I feel like that's been such an interesting theme for so many of our participants has been the way in which people in this community do sort of feel comfortable and go between all the different synagogues. And of course, we're going to be talking a lot about the JCC and your interview today. But before I get to that, I do want to ask you a little bit more about your grandparents too, because I got the sense that they were really important to you and really shaped you growing up. So maybe share a little bit about them and also like what the importance of that relationship or relationships were to you.
Yeah, I was very close, lucky to have 3 of my grandparents until my 20s, all living in Birmingham. Pretty much everybody knew them. I grew up cooking with my grandmothers, and so that really was a pivotal point in my life, because everybody knows I love to cook. My grandfather was a handball champion, and we would go everywhere, and everybody would know him. It didn't matter where we were. Everybody knew Jack Dorsky, and so that was really cool growing up. I thought he was a celebrity.
What are some of the things that your grandmother's cooked, out of curiosity?
So one side of the family is Sephardic, and my mom will make a lot of those dishes for holidays and just anytime. My other grandmother was known for a cream cheese pound cake and a party coffee cake, and I still make those recipes today. And I live in what was my grandparents' home. They built it, and my dad grew up there, starting when he was about 2 years old. So that's really special that I get to have that in my life today.
I have to say too, I really love the distinction of a party coffee cake versus a regular coffee cake. I'm kind of dying to know what the difference is between the two things.
That was what it was called in the Siegel family cookbook.
And I also wanted to ask you, just as a follow-up to one thing you just shared, one part of your family is Sephardic. Like, were there any sort of ways in which Sephardic traditions or rituals were part of your Jewish life growing up, besides sort of, or food specifically?
Not so much religiously, but we would have our Toronto family reunions every other year, and we still do. And they're big, and my mom and I have helped plan them over the years, and so it's really fun because we have a boya brunch, which is a pastry filled with either like a spinach and cheese filling or a potato and cheese filling. And so the boya brunch is always like the biggest deal of the weekend. It's the farewell brunch, and whichever city is hosting the reunion at the time gets together and makes hundreds of these in advance. And so that's a really neat thing to be able to do.
That's really cool, and that also sounds delicious. So I wanted to ask you too a little bit about, and it's interesting, you mentioned sort of the religious split lives between you and your sister. I also discovered when we first talked that despite what I thought, you actually did not go to the day school, even though your sister did. You went through the Mountain Brook system. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about, that school system and what it meant to you, and growing up in Mountain Brook and sort of the importance of that community to your early life.
Yeah, I loved growing up in Mountain Brook. Some of my closest friends from Mountain Brook are here today, and they're part of my life. And I had a lot of non-Jewish and Jewish friends growing up at Mountain Brook and felt like I fit right in. I didn't run into any anti-Semitic events. I do know some people who had issues with that over the years, but I never felt it personally. It felt like a great place to grow up. We had about 60 Jewish people in our grade, and that we all knew each other. Back then most people lived in Mountain Brook, and so whether you went to Emmanuel or Bethel, it didn't matter, or KI, it didn't matter. We all knew each other. So it's really different today.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you talk a little bit about how you've seen that change, or what you sort of think the impact is?
Yeah, everybody lives.
He agrees, by the way.
He does, because he lives in New Orleans. People live all over Birmingham now, and so it's different. Kids don't grow up all together with this built-in group of friends. I think fewer and fewer are attending synagogue for religious school and being bar and bat mitzvah, and so it's really different. I think it's a sign of the times changing. Sports are a really big thing. They're very competitive now. I think that kind of plays a part in it.
I know that's going to tie into your KCC journey too as we get to that.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit more about, I know that we've already talked a little bit about the synagogues that your family at different points belonged to, Emmanuel, to Bethel, to KI. But tell me about sort of the role of those institutions in your life, your family's life, how Judaism was practiced at home. I always kind of like to know for our interviewees sort of what role Judaism played for them growing up.
Yeah, growing up, like I said, I was raised at Temple Emmanuel, bat mitzvah there, confirmed. At home, we would celebrate Friday night Shabbat almost every week. My mom makes the most delicious challah.
It seems like a theme in your family.
You can't escape the food. And so that was really special. And I know as I've gotten older, I'm less engaged in synagogue life. I think it's just kind of where I'm at. Programming doesn't exactly speak to me. Maybe again one day, but for right now, this is where my Jewish home is.
Yeah. Were there like any other holidays that were particularly important to your family growing up? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, we host Rosh Hashanah lunch most years, and not one, and Seder, not one more than the other necessarily, but I love celebrating Jewish holidays, and right now the past couple of years, it's kind of been hard. Like Jack was born around Rosh Hashanah last year, and we had to cancel having lunch, and so we're missing a lot of the family holidays, and it's really important to me that we all get together and celebrate. Because if we stop, it's going to go away.
Yeah, it sounds like that sense of family is like really deeply important to you
Yeah.
too. Well, I want to get to something that's going to be at the heart of our interview today, which is your relationship with the JCC. So tell me about the role of this place in your childhood.
I was raised here. I went to preschool. I played on the tennis courts. I learned how to swim with Coach John when I was 2, who still coaches people today, and went to camp and swim team, and if there was an activity, I was here for it. This was, the easy place that would just drop us off, and we, it was carte blanche. Whatever we wanted to do, we could do, and we got away with it, except for running in the halls when Ruth would scold us.
I have to say too, I have been really struck by, you're not the first person who's really highlighted in one of these interviews the very unsupervised nature of children in the JCC in a different era. And one term that you haven't brought up, but I was literally in a meeting yesterday where people were using it, was J-Rats. What does that mean? Who are the J-Rats? What is that all about?
We all were just allowed to be dropped off, and even my parents will tell stories about how they would get dropped off and they would do the exact same thing, and it's a safe space, and I think times have changed and that parents aren't as comfortable just dropping their kids off and letting them be on their own, but back in the early 90s, it was a really great time, and we were here, we lived here, we were running, like I said, running the hallways, and so I think that's we were the J-Rats. We were like those, little probably grimy kids who, were just having a good time.
Okay, one more question about that term. Were people calling you that at the time, or is this like a retrospective term?
No,
that was
it was at the time.
It's very funny to me.
Like Florina threw her hands up in the air when you said J-Rats.
Okay, I missed that. So tell me a little bit too about, I know your parents met here at the J, but also that your dad was past president. So, was that sort of part of the connection here for you too? Or I guess I'm curious, if you saw your parents sort of active in the community and how that shaped you.
Yeah, they were both involved in different boards while I was growing up. And my dad was president here in '99, and then went on to be on the JCC Association National Board. And so we got to go to some of the biennial programs and see that and how really neat that was. And so I think it was just instilled at me in a young age, but just growing up, watching them be involved in the community, being involved in youth groups that taught us Tikkun Olam, and so I think it was just natural to get involved, and so I joined the board here about 8 years ago, although it feels like a lot longer than that. And it's great. It's really nostalgic when you walk in the J, and things haven't changed so much. When I was young, in the early 90s, we renovated the building, and I was talking to my dad earlier today, and some of my greatest memories of being here as a kid were when the building was being renovated, and we had JCC day camp in trailers in the front parking lot. And that's, to me, it's funny, some of my only memories of camp are from being in those trailers. But I think it was fun.
I can understand how as a kid that would seem sort of maybe exciting and new. Mm-hmm. That is really fun. One more sort of child question I want to ask you before we get more into adulthood. You did mention in our initial interview sort of summer camp and youth group and the importance of those things. Anything you want to say on those subjects?
Yeah, like I said, I was really involved in NIFTY and BBYO locally, and then went to sleepaway camp at Camp Barney Minutes, and one summer at Camp Ramada Rome that was not my most favorite, but I survived. Some friends back there with me. And I really do think that that's probably what really instilled my passion for Judaism. Getting to be with people for an extended period of time, doing secular activities, was also celebrating Shabbat with them, and I just, any opportunity that a child can have to go to sleepaway camp, I think it's really transformative.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I wonder if it's going to kind of connect into where I want to go next, which is talking a little bit about your time at UA. So tell us sort of like how you get to UA. I will say I feel like I wasn't so surprised, because I feel like talking to you, it's clear that this is really home for you and that you have a deep connection to Alabama. But tell us about the decision to go there, and also I had no idea what impact you had on sort of Jewish life on campus there. So I'd love for you to share that.
I never in a million years thought that I would go to Alabama for college. I applied out of state, a couple other places that had huge Jewish populations. I went and visited them. I was accepted. And then I went and visited Tuscaloosa, and I really loved it, which was shocking. I didn't want to be 45 minutes away from home. And so I decided to go there. They had the major I wanted. The one thing lacking was really Jewish life on campus. And so from the get-go, I got involved in Hillel, but I mean, we would have 8 people at Shabbat dinners, and we were the ones cooking the food, and it wasn't really what I was wanting. And so I don't know that I made a conscious decision to really do what I did, but with the help of my mom and Joyce and some others from the Federation and just the Birmingham Jewish community, we really transformed what Bama Hillel is today. And so I'm really proud of that. I was on the board and then became president for 2 years. I got to travel with the university president on the jet to Atlanta to help recruit Jewish students, which was just like an awesome experience. We started planning these recruitment weekends, so we would bring in high schoolers from around the Southeast or anywhere if they found out about it. And like a couple of people that when they were in high school, they went to Alabama, and some are married today.
Wow.
And it's really, really an awesome thing.
Can you, for anybody who's sort of listening, especially on the recording who doesn't know, can you sort of like paint a picture of what Bama Hillel does look like today? Because I know it is very different than what you just described of like 8 people cooking their own Shabbat dinner. But
yeah, when I was there, it was a really dated building that was across the street from the Bryant-Denny Stadium, and now they built a building probably now, I would guess about 8 or 10 years ago. It shares a sidewalk with the synagogue in Tuscaloosa, and they have upwards of 100+ students, at Shabbats and at high holiday celebrations. And I just heard yesterday they're about to hire an assistant director. We didn't even have a director when I was there, and so this is like, to watch this, how it's getting bigger and bigger is really awesome.
I'm kind of curious, like, what do you think were sort of the biggest like learning lessons for you in that? Like, what did you sort of take away from it in sort of Jewish engagement or anything really that, I guess I'm sort of seeing that as something that's going to lead into your sort of further experience.
I mean, I think I've always been engaged.
Yeah.
So it was just a natural extension. But, I think really the people who came to Alabama, who made the choice to come to Alabama when Jewish life was being rebuilt, they were probably already engaged in their communities just like I was. And so I think that helped in making it what it is today. And here we are.
What is the jet like? I was surprised to hear that there is a university jet, which you said to me was like, really? You're surprised?
It was really nice. I was afraid to touch anything. The seatbelts were gold, and I just...
What?
I have a picture. We have like a really old, before we ever had an official logo, we had a Bama Hillel banner printed, and so we all posed in front of the jet with Dr. Witt, who was just really great and a great friend to the Jewish community.
That is really cool. That's a bucket list item to check off.
That's awesome.
So what did you study while you were there?
I studied restaurant and hospitality management.
And I always like to ask people this question, because obviously everybody we interviewed did either come or come back to Birmingham. But, did you think you would come back to Birmingham? Was that sort of a conscious decision, or tell us about that?
Yeah, I don't think I ever considered moving anywhere else. Birmingham is my home, and I still feel that way. Family is so important to me, and I can't imagine not being here. I love the size of our city and what we have to offer, and so Birmingham was it.
This is kind of just like an hour random aside question, but I am sort of curious, like if you could sort of pinpoint what feels so special about this community, this Jewish community to you, like what would you sort of put in words there?
Growing up, I feel like we all knew each other. It's changed. It's not so much the same now, but you could go and you would just see someone, and it's easy. And I feel like I have friendships that span the generations. As obvious today, a lot of these people came to see me, and I'm really grateful for that.
I think I forgot the second half of my question, so that's actually you and me both. So we'll just move on from it.
Okay, great.
But I will say that I also am always impressed with like how many people, especially of I think like your generation or our generation, we're the same generation, but I'm not from here, but who like went away and came back or stayed in Birmingham. So that does seem like a testament to the community, and it is a really special one. And I think you're right. There's like that sense of closeness, which is really nice.
And I've had friends who moved away after college and then have now moved back, and wanted to be here. And so I do think we have a special community in Birmingham.
Is there anything else you want to say about the importance of those friendships? Because it does actually seem like you're somebody who has like a very tight friend group.
I mean, they're just special. They all support me all the time back there in the back of the room. We're all here for each other, and the good and the bad. And not everybody can say they have lifelong friends. I mean, some of our parents went to high school together, and longer than that, and like that's really cool.
That is really cool. Okay, I'm moving us back onto the chronological track for a minute. So you come back to Birmingham, you have studied sort of restaurant hospitality. I know that you do go into that world for a little bit, and that now today you work in your family business, which I think is really cool and seems very much part of sort of the things that you value. But tell us a little bit about like your journey to getting towards the family business.
Yeah, so I graduated college during a recession. So I got a job at a restaurant that was only open during the morning hours. And then I decided to start a little side hustle called Bon Appetissa. And so I would cook meals that people could come pick up, and they'd have dinner ready made. And that kind of long-term morphed into cooking for the Jewish holidays. So I started with latkes, which I now make about almost 2,000 a season.
2,000?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say 200 when you started that sentence.
They're exhausting and they're smelly, but I make really good latkes. And so I do Rosh Hashanah, break fast, Passover, Hamantash, and so that's kind of, like a little side hustle. But I did work in nonprofit for about 10 years and did event management and helped plan fundraisers for a couple different organizations. And the job that I was last doing they got rid of my position, and my parents were looking for somebody, and so it was meant to be temporary, but I went to work at Daystar Construction, and here we are 10 years later. So it's worked out really well. I mean, I grew up listening to my parents, talking about work every night at the dinner table, and, they've worked together now for 40 plus years. And so now I'm a part of that, and it's really neat.
What are the joys and challenges of working with family? I know they're sitting here. So.
Working with family. But I get to see this business that my parents built, close to 45 years ago, and the relationships they've cultivated through that. And
okay, I'm also still a little stuck on the 2,000 latkes. How do you logistically pull that off? Do you start cooking them very far in advance and freeze them?
I do. I make them usually about starting 6 weeks in advance. They freeze beautifully, reheat in the oven great. I have a very tight system now of how I make them, and I can knock it out in usually 4 to 5 days.
That's still very
And
impressive.
I'm really tired at the end of those days, but I do it.
And I'm sure your house also smells like latkes for a month. But that's not a horrible thing. And I know you mentioned a few other things, but what are some of the other holiday foods that you're particularly excited about making, or that people, seem particularly excited to purchase?
So I make a pretty great brisket, which was showcased at the food festival on Sunday. That was my recipe. I also make noodle kugel. I make Roz's roulage recipe, and everybody loved those. And I actually recently made a friend in an art class, an older lady who lives in Mountain Brook, and she took one to where she works, and now all the ladies where she works order them.
Oh, that's so lovely.
So roulage was at a lot of ladies' Easter lunches this year, which is just really funny. But roulage is definitely my number one seller, and I'm actually making some more tonight for a couple people.
I love that cross-cultural connection. That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about the J. You know, you mentioned earlier that you've been on the board for about 8 years. How did you get involved? Was it an easy decision to join? And you told me to not ask you 2 questions at once, so I'm going to save the other question that I have in my head.
Yeah, I don't even remember who asked me to join the board, but it was a no-brainer. I was like more than happy to get involved. And that was about 2017, I think. And since then, we've hosted the Maccabi Games, which was really awesome because I did participate in the Maccabi Games in Memphis when I was younger, played tennis, and just, you know, we've gone through a lot of transition here, and never expected to be president yet, this young. But started as secretary for a couple years, even had a bonus year, and then it just kind of naturally progressed that way.
Well, I want to talk to you more about your presidency, but one thing that also occurred to me when you were saying that 8 years is that you were president here during COVID. So I know that there have been lots of transitions, but that's sort of a big one that stands out. Like anything that you would sort of share about that time and how the J responded and being part of that moment? 'Cause that was a challenging moment.
I mean, at that time, truthfully, we were talking about, are we going to survive this? Will the J be here in 2 years? And so I'm really proud of where we've come today. During COVID, we really, you know, people couldn't come in, and so we pivoted and we, you know, served food boxes from United Way in the parking lot for anybody who needed food, and that was like such an awesome accomplishment. Part of, you know, get to be part of that. We sometimes would pack the boxes in the auditorium, sometimes they would come to us packed and ready to pass out. And so, you know, we were here for the community, for the greater community, when everybody really needed it.
Yeah, that is a real sense of accomplishment. Yeah, that's interesting. I was just noticing that timeline. Well, so you said it was sort of easy decision to be on the board. Was it an easy decision to become president? And I do want to just highlight too that, you know, you are one of the youngest presidents. I think we were unclear if you're the youngest, but one of the youngest, and the first legacy president, which is kind of cool. So tell me about that decision and taking that step into becoming board president.
It was a very hard decision. I did not accept that willingly. I had it took me a while, and then I did. It took me a long time. But for months, Hiltonberger and Jesse Unkenholtz were really trying to chase me down and get me to commit to it. And I was like, no, I'm not ready. I'm too young. I'm just a kid. I still feel like a kid. And I had lunch with Jesse on October 10th of 2023. And so that was like, you know, what is happening? What's going to happen to our community? What's happening in the world? And they, you know, they worked me over, and I finally said yes. It was like, you know, when you go to convert, you have to go to the rabbi 3 times before they'll say yes. And they had to come to me that many times. And, you know, I'm glad that I committed.
I want to ask you about some positive things and things you're excited about, but I do also want to ask you, because I don't think I've quite put that timeline together, like what has it been like coming into this presidency right after October 7th, sort of in the wake of October 7th?
Yeah, I became president in January of 2024,
Okay.
So it was really still very raw after October 7th attacks, and it was hard. It was very hard. The J was here for the community, but, you know, just everybody, tensions were high, and then we had a lot of difficulties last year in the beginning of my presidency, and I was like, what have I done? But it's gotten much better thanks to our staff and our great board. This year's been a lot smoother.
Well, let me use that as a transition into asking you about some of the things that you're really excited about as president. I know you have some things you've already accomplished that are exciting, and also some things sort of in your vision in the future. So I'd love if you could share some of those with us.
Yeah, like I just mentioned, just a couple years ago, we were talking about, like, will we be here in a couple years? Can we survive? And it's really exciting because, and thanks to some COVID money But we are going to pay off our long-term debt in the next year and a half, which is a huge deal. We have some really exciting projects coming up. Demo is actually starting today in the men's locker room showers. We're getting to do projects that the members will actually benefit from. We've replaced the HVAC systems on the roof, but like members have no idea, nor do they care. But we're doing the locker room bathrooms. We're doing a couple other bathrooms throughout the building. We're redoing some of the tennis ball courts now. Pickleball and tennis. The tennis courts to become pickleball outside, so we can offer inside and outside. So it's really exciting. We can have like these great projects that when I joined the board, I never would have dreamt that we could do any renovations in this building. And so I'm excited about that. We're also embarking on some mission and vision work to update our mission statement and to create a vision that we've never had, actually.
That's awesome. That sounds really exciting. And also, we'll just highlight one recent success. Many of us were at the food festival just this past weekend. Anything you want to share about how that went, or what was sort of exciting about that event too?
It was amazing, to pivot inside from a rain plan, and as a past chair of the food festival, I was really grateful for the staff who just took charge and made it happen, and it was an awesome day. Couldn't have asked for it to be better, I don't think. And attendance was great. I heard people raving about the food.
Food was really good.
And that's what you really want.
Well, I have just
the music. My dad's band was also top notch.
Wait, actually, I'm so glad you shouted that out, because I meant for you to mention your dad's band, the Shabatones, somewhere in this interview. Anything you want to add about that? That was part of your initial story.
Yeah. So back when Rabbi Glessman was in town, he formed a band with my dad and Bruce Downs, and they were the Shabbatones, and they would play at Shabbat services at Temple Bethel, and to me it felt really campy, like a camp style service, which I love from going to Sequoia Camp, and so that was a cute time.
Was this the same band at the food festival?
No.
This is a different band.
This is a rock band.
This is a rock band. I missed it. So, okay, cool. Well, I have just a few sort of closing questions as we get towards the end of our interview. One is, well, actually, I'm going to start with this one, and then we'll go back to some J-related questions. But I feel like you kind of started mentioning this earlier in the interview, but I do always like to take the opportunity when we have like a younger generation guest on to ask you like what you think sort of the opportunities and challenges are for engaging young people in our community. Like, what do you think is going really well? What do you wish you saw more of? Because this is a rare opportunity where we get to like hear from young people themselves on camera.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities, like I mentioned earlier, families are more engaged in secular activities now. I would love to see how we can really reel them in. I feel like I'm in a weird place. I'm a single young adult, but I'm not so young that like I don't feel comfortable going to You Belong in Birmingham events anymore. So I don't feel like that's really touched very well in the community. All my friends go to Tot Shabbat and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm not going to go to that. So I think there's opportunity there, to figure out how to engage people like me. Because right now the JCC is my Jewish home. I'm a member at Temple Emmanuel, but I'm really not active at all.
Yeah, I think it's a really good, important insight. I think I shared back with you too that even as a Tot Shabbat goer, I would love to see something that is not Tot Shabbat for people our age too. Yeah. So a few J-related questions. I really want to just sort of like pull this all together by asking you what makes you feel passionate about the J. I mean, obviously you have like deep personal connections here, but what about the J as an institution do you feel like is so important that you're obviously giving a lot of your time and energy to it?
We're a gym and we're a place for ladies to come play mahjong and to knit and we have our regular activities that have been here forever and always, but also right now we've made it really a priority to reach underserved populations, and so we teach swim school to students who would otherwise not have that opportunity, Tai Chi and art classes. We're about to start with the Arc of Jefferson County, a nonprofit who serves people with developmental disabilities. They're going to be able to come with a job coach and learn how to, and show up how they can sweep and how to greet in the lobby and do other tasks to help them succeed in life. And Brooke really has made that happen. And so I love that we, not only serve the Jewish community, but we are here for the greater Birmingham community who allow us to exist as the Jewish community. We could not be here without the greater community.
Yeah, and I'd love to connect a dot there too, because I feel like you shared with me previously that there's a way in which the J serves a really important outreach role. How do you see, how am I trying to phrase this question? There's a way in which the J is able to sort of interface with the broader community that might have a positive community relations impact. Share a little bit about that.
I think the J also right now has the most visibility to help fight anti-Semitism. I'm guessing 80% of our membership is probably not Jewish. And that allows them, non-Jewish people in the building all day, every day, to really learn about Judaism and anti-Semitism and take it into the community, should something come up around them. And that's a rare thing.
Yeah, and I'll just say with my JCRC hat on, we've really enjoyed partnering more with the J this year. It's been a wonderful space to be able to pull together, programs, recent interfaith security training, all sorts of things. So we appreciate that partnership. And the last question I want to ask you is just, you obviously have this long history with the J. How has the J changed in your lifetime, and how has its essence also stayed the same?
That's a funny word. From when I was little, in the 90s, we did the renovation, and so the building itself has changed. Bulk of my life, it stayed the same. Nothing's changed. Maybe it's a fresh coat of paint. But that's starting to change, and we're talking about planning for the future, and so who knows what that's going to bring. But something that, also has stayed the same is, I told Margaret the other day when we met, sometimes when I walk in the hallway behind the front desk, I don't know what causes it and why it happens one day of the week or 1 hour of the week, but there is this smell that takes me back to my childhood, and it's probably it smells a little woody maybe, so it's probably some mold, who knows, but it brings back the memories.
And now I feel like I need to give you another question to close on. Anything I haven't asked you that you want to share?
No, I'm just really grateful for everybody being here today and, supporting me, but as just me, Isa, but also as president of the J and the JCC itself.
Well, I think that's actually a good place to end our third season of Southern Jewish Voices. So thank you, Isa, and thank you all for being here.